Awesome.
So we're actually live on YouTube right now.
Well, that's amazing. All right. I'll record my end as well.
Just heard myself.
You can hear me?
No, I just heard you on the live stream back to me. Myself back on. Should probably just close this thing. Although it's not showing you on the camera, I don't think, on the live stream.
Oh, I'll just share my screen. Let's see my mug. But I can you enable participant sharing, please?
Enable participant sharing. Uh, remove participant. Share. You mean screen share?
Yeah, that.
Yeah. That's all set.
I don't know what screen two. All right, can you see my screen?
I can, but the question is, can other people see your screen? And that's the question here. That I'm not confident about. Oh, they can. Okay, they can see it. Yeah. They can
Okay,
see your
cool.
screen. All right. And they can see me in the screen, but they can't see you in the screen. That's okay. But you're also, but it's probably because you don't have your video on. That's probably why.
No, I don't have my video on.
Yeah. Okay, that's fine.
We'll worry about the screen. Um, all right, so I guess we'll start.
We need to get the YouTube link out. So we got to delete the
Okay, cool.
first one we sent out, and let me delete this one because it's confusing. Delete. Well, I can undo it. Undo repost. Okay.
I'll delete my tweet. Like we're in crypto and say untechnical.
Yeah, no, right. Uh, doing a live stream with Roots Crypto Talk. And we'll post it in Discord as well. All right. How about telling people are actually on this thing? Still there?
Yep.
Yes. Ooh. That's
Lashing.
okay. I guess we're ready to go, but I don't really know how to like see the chat or anything like this.
Yeah, I don't know. If you go to your YouTube part, it should have like the comments on the side on YouTube. I've seen it on videos.
Yeah, I don't see that right now. Maybe this has to be like enabled or something. Or maybe there's a different mini
What
player.
channel are you using?
My own YouTube channel.
See if I watch it. There we go. Hey, look at that.
Maybe we'll just use the thread in Discord.
I think 3 people are watching. So we're going to see 3 are watching. Yeah, we can
Uh,
use Discord thread.
oh yeah, now it's 8 people are watching. Okay, so we're actually getting. All right, we'll use the Discord thread. I don't know how to get the actual chat thing going in YouTube. I don't know how to do that shit because I'm apparently a retard. But We'll just use the Discord thread on the general channel that people can post into, I suppose.
Yeah, yeah. I think if you're logged in, you can put in. There you go. You can put in questions and stuff in the live chat.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's start.
All right, let's do it. Let's
So,
do it. Let's chat all things THORChain.
all right, so we're going to talk about rapid swaps. We talked about this on the Spaces last week, and I thought it was a very interesting concept. I like learning new things. Before we get to rapid swaps, I wanted to, I guess, bring people up to speed for anyone that doesn't really I think rapid swaps a bit advanced. It's not exactly the easiest concept to get your head around. So I thought we'll start from where we are up to streaming swaps. We'll introduce order books. So probably finish that off, and then we can get into rapid swaps as it's a combination of existing, say, features or processes within THORChain.
Yep. Yep. Okay.
So I just did some quick drawings here. We've got a liquidity pool, and then we can do swapping. And this is the core of THORChain, because everything in THORChain revolves around swapping. Even all the features have swapping under the hood. So obviously, if you're going to swap Rune for Bitcoin, you're adding Rune, you're removing Bitcoin, and you're taking the pool out of balance. And then ARBs come and they put the pool in balance. So for every swap, there's usually an ARB, which is really another swap to counter that swap on the other side. You can have single swaps, which is always going to involve Rune. And then if you're doing a double swap, like we always use the Bitcoin to Ethereum example, you're really doing two swaps. So if you're adding Ethereum to Bitcoin, you're going Ethereum in, adding Ether, taking away Rune, and then it goes to the BTC pool to add Rune and take away BTC. So you're bringing the pool out of balance.
Yep.
I put up some graphs from this really good website to try and explain the XYK curve. And if you've got a balanced pool of, say, 50 bananas and 50 apples, clearly rips it off somewhere else. The pool's in balance, and you've got the price point at this happy medium because both sides are balanced. So the pool's balanced at this point. So if I go along and grab my little liquidity pool, I won't spend too much time on this, but the pool's balanced over at this point in time. And if you're doing a little bit of a swap, you're taking the pool a little bit out of balance. And you can see here, you've added a bit of banana and taken away some apple. And then if you do a large swap, you're moving up this curve more. And the more you move up this curve, the more of a fee you pay. It's really the less you get, but you can consider that a fee. So, and that's the demanding liquidity now. So the more you want now, the more you've got to pay. And it's kind of like the reverse of bulk buy is like how I think about it. So just try and picture this XYK curve and moving up depending on how much you're moving this pool out of balance. So that is equivalent to that. And this is equivalent to this one, small swap, big swap.
Yep.
So obviously if you're a big whale, then you don't want to be paying huge amounts of fees. So we introduced streaming swaps where we take one big trade and we break it up over the smaller trades. And then that allows the ARB, the counter trade, to come along. And that essentially takes the effect on the pool is it's just having all these mini swaps instead of one large swap, which is going to take the pool out of balance. It's only doing a little bit at a time and allowing the ARB to readjust, as you know. So then we're breaking it up, and this is what it's going to look like on the block. We have the first trade. This is if we're doing like a 1-5, which is the memo here. So a 1-5 for streaming. We have the block. Then we have we're going to go ahead and have the ARB, the counterbait, and then the third trade, then the fourth trade, and the fifth trade.
Yep.
And one thing I wanted to point out is if we're doing large swaps, this is a kind of what it was before. That's the same as stacking all of the swaps, all of those trades within one block without the ARBs. This and this are the same. So you need that ARB to do the counterbalance. That's why you can't have streaming swaps all in one block. It's got to be spread out over time.
Yep.
So then we have the synth flow. I've covered this a lot in videos. So with synthetics, you move from a layer one asset through to a synthetic asset, and there's two swaps to do the minting. And then the same is the reverse for redeeming. So you take a synthetic asset, you do 2 swaps on it to get to a back to an L1 asset.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be streamed, same thing. If it's a large amount, it can go through the same streaming swap process.
Mm-hmm.
Or anything you want to add there before we go to order books?
No, at high level, that's basically how it works.
Okay, sweet. So order books. We talked about this a little bit before. So when I get a swapper says puts in Bitcoin or puts in an asset and says I want to buy Ethereum at say $1,860, and then I know that gets streamed into a synthetic, or it gets moved into a synthetic, and maybe you can take that from there to complete my understanding of order books before we get to rapid swaps.
Yep. Yeah. So order books, you're really just creating limit orders, right? If you're familiar with basic trading concepts, and so you're in a regular swap or a streaming swap, you're setting what you have and you're setting what you want. Like I have 1 Bitcoin and I want X USDC or whatever the hell it is, and you're telling the network what the result is you want to see, and it makes its best effort within that time frame of trying to execute the trade. And a limit order effectively is the same thing. It just the only real difference is that it just waits around until it can execute the thing that you want. 1 Bitcoin for X number of USDC on the other side. And so, in a regular swap, we try to do that best you can within a short period of time. And in a limit order, we do the same thing, but just we have a more or less longer period of time to attempt to execute that trade to get the exact number of USDC you want on the other side.
Cool. So just to understand the flow, if we send Bitcoin in and we want to get Ethereum, where it gets converted to a synthetic, I know that. Where does this synthetic sit and wait until the price point is met, or it's got a corresponding order to match against?
It just sits in the protocol. Specifically, if you wanted the specific, I think it'd be the Asgard module within the network, but it just sits there and waits for execution, I believe. So if you start with BDC, I think in order to open a limit order, you have to start with the synthetic asset. And so you have to swap the BDC into the synthetic BDC, and then you can put your price or whatever, which conceptually is the same thing you do on like regular trading, like on a Binance or a Coinbase type, where you deposit a bunch of Bitcoin, you get like a IOU Bitcoin, right? And then you do a bunch of trading internally within Binance or whatever. You just like trade a bunch of times or whatever you're trying to do. And then at the end of it all, you have like an IOU, Ether or something like this. And then you just cash that Ether out from an IOU to a layer 1. And so effectively you're doing the same thing. You're starting with layer 1 Bitcoin, you deposit it, you get kind of this like IOU Bitcoin, which is kind of wrong phrase in this context, but for lack of a better term. And the only real difference between us and Coinbase is that you have to pay fees to enter and to pay fees to exit. Whereas on those, it's basically free with minus gas fees, I think.
Okay, cool. So the swapper adds their native, this is their L1 Bitcoin, and then that gets converted to synthetics, and then that sits in the Asgard module.
Yep.
And then it just waits until Ethereum is at the correct price, and then it will send corresponding Ethereum out.
Correct. And it can do this in a streaming swap mentality where it breaks up the Bitcoin into smaller bits and then waits for a certain price and then carries on. The code right now that already does limit orders that exists in the chain right now that doesn't support streaming swaps because it didn't exist at the time that I had written the original code for order books. But it's one of the things I'd like to do when we get back to this feature at some point in the future is to implement streaming swaps within order books. So we have a nice price execution.
Yeah, that was when I streaming swaps, order books with streaming swaps, I think is kind of pretty cool.
Yeah.
And then obviously it just does. So it sits in the it will sit in the pool in this Asgard module, synthetic BTC, for the swap to happen, does it go? Does it do a double swap with native L1? Like, how does it, or is it a swapping across synthetic and then it gets converted to synthetic? So are you swapping synthetic assets? So synthetic Ethereum comes out and then it gets moved to an L1 Ether on the way out?
Yeah, so you put in the Bitcoin, you get the synthetic Bitcoin, which sits in the Asgard module, waiting for the price execution.
Yep.
It eventually does the trade, theoretically, to Ether, which is a synthetic ETH. And then once that's done, then it could do another trade, synthetic ETH to ETH. There's been some kind of debates internally with the devs about like what the user experience should be. And there's some of the devs that feel that the best way to do it is that like it should be more of like a traditional trading environment where it doesn't really just, you're not going from layer one to layer one and exiting.
Hmm.
And like I'm depositing layer one, does limit order, and then exit to the Bitcoin.
Yeah. I mean, that makes sense from an end user point of view.
For my point of
But
view, the way I look at it is that like I think we could just support both mentalities and allow you to do either one of the two. But if you're gonna do this limit order thing, going from L1 to L1, you're gonna pay 5 bips to get to the synthetic Bitcoin. You're gonna pay 5 bips to the swap to the synthetic ETH, and pay another 5 bips to get to the layer one, Ether.
yeah.
Right. So you'll probably do something along the lines of like 15 bips, which still is like really good price execution. Don't get me wrong, that's actually quite competitive with the industry in a sense. But obviously it's more efficient to just hold the Bitcoin in the network and do a bunch of trades and whatever it is you want to do and accomplish, and hold it there and then exit when you're ready to exit.
Yeah, I like the idea of both, because if you're looking to trade just to do, like, some people do synthetic trades. You see a lot of native Bitcoin go into synthetic Bitcoin and perhaps they're just trading it.
Yep.
So they're not paying the fee.
Yep. I guess one of the interesting questions that people have to like think about or ask themselves is that we often talk about how you shouldn't deposit coins into Coinbase or to Binance and leave them there because you can get rugged because I was just talking to a friend of mine yesterday who had a bunch of money in like 3 Bitcoin in BlockFi, and it's all gone. He lost it. And so is THORChain the same as that? Like, should we still have like not your key, not your crypto mentality when it comes to THORChain? And it's a little bit kind of a funny question because like on the one hand, yes, you should always hold your own tokens and not enshrine them to somebody else to maintain. But the difference is here that it's a decentralized blockchain, and it's not a black box CeFi or CeFi corporation like a Coinbase or a Binance or a Kraken or a BlockFi or a Voyager. And so it's kind of like it's a little bit muddier or a little bit more gray in this context in my viewpoint. But whatever viewpoint you may have on this, it's probably a valid one.
I mean, it's a net positive. But I would be putting your full bag into any one protocol.
Yeah, I
because
wouldn't.
if it goes
I wouldn't
down,
say that.
yeah.
Yeah. I would agree with you in that sense. You wouldn't want to put your full bag anywhere, not THORChain or otherwise. But like if you want to be purist about it and then like not your keys, not your crypto mentality, then you can do your trading from layer one to layer one, and so that it never really is on the chain or on THORChain for longer than the trade execution time is. But at the same time, it's gonna be the most expensive way of doing this because you're gonna have to pay gas on the way in, pay gas on the way out, and all these like fees in between. And it's cheaper just to like deposit, make a bunch of trades over some period of time, whether it be a day or a week or whatever it is that you decide for yourself if you're a trader, and then exit whenever you want to exit. It's much more like capital efficient or cheaper. You save a lot of money doing it that way, but then you also take on the additional risk of of depositing your value into a protocol that has and always will have protocol risk.
Mm-hmm. You think smart people are not going to be putting all of it inside of synthetics just to trade? So they keep some on the side. They've got like a cold storage. They're keeping it.
Yeah.
I, we talked about this on we talked about on the live on the spaces where it's like you've got a lot of room and you've got Bitcoin. You want to put that into savers, but that means you've got all that protocol risk, even though you've got Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Again, not your keys, not your coin. I'm a big believer of, you've got to have something on the side.
Yeah.
Even just some BTC sitting in some cold storage somewhere. But
Yep.
yeah, it is. It's like I said, it's a net benefit because open source, decentralized protocol. But if we've seen it before, if something were to happen, consensus failure, some issue, then you got to be in trouble. You got to be worried.
We should actually talk about the reason why it's synthetics only, or technically it's not synthetics only. It's actually native assets to THORChain that you could use, and so that right now that's just synthetics and Rune itself. And the reason why that limit orders are limited to this is because if we take in some layer one Bitcoin, it has to live inside of the pool in order for it to be secured by the Rune that people are bonding. So if you have Bitcoin outside of the pools, that is basically unsecured Bitcoin in a matter of speaking, right? And we can't just arbitrarily, have, an unlimited amount of unsecured Bitcoin sitting outside the pools, because that would just break economic security. And people could attack us on Asgard and make it profitable, which obviously we don't want to do. And so it has to be inside the pool. In order to do that, it has to be synthetic. And then with that comes limitations of how much synthetics we can support on the protocol versus like the synth utilization of a pool and that kind of stuff. So that's the reason why you can't do with layer ones. I don't mind doing this for streaming. We do this for streaming swaps, and I don't mind that for streaming swaps because it's a transient thing by nature. If we put limits on how long a streaming swap can exist on the protocol, I think the maximum is like a day for external assets like Bitcoin. But for order like limit orders, that could be a day, it could be a week, it could be a month, it could be like just a long-term bet that you're making that you think that some coins can like dump 90%. You just want to be there to pick it up when it does. So it's like that stuff can live, more or less forever, depending upon the limitations that the protocol, the order book system puts on the user, which I don't know if that number is going to be for us, but that's the reason why you have to do with synthetics or native assets, because it's has to be secured assets for sure.
Yeah, because it's synthetics. It goes in the liquidity pool, so it needs to be secured by bond. And then that room, you could say, for in the pool would be competing against savers and all that type of stuff and other synthetics. So that's going to be interesting if the cat, the total bonded is not too high.
Right. If synthetics become a big thing within the context of limit orders, like people use it as a professional trading tool, then the more synths we have in this order book, the less synths we're going to have for savers, right? But the number of synths are still higher. So savers are going to get less of a yield because the yield of a saver is relative to the depth of the synth utilization of that pool. So if you get a bunch of synths being minted for the purpose of order books and taking a long-term position on, on a buy order or a sell order or whatever it is, then the yield of savers are naturally going to go down, but the synth utilization of synthetic Bitcoin is just going to increase, which is good for the protocol. It means more liquidity, deeper pools.
And you could clog that. You could attack that by saying, "Oh, look, I'll put 1,000 Ethereum in a limit order for $1,000 Bitcoin. Like it's never going to get filled."
Yeah. Yep.
And then you've just spanned the whole deal.
Yep.
Can you cancel this? So just say I was very silly and I got fat fingers and I put in 1,000 Ethereum for $1,000 Bitcoin. And I'm like, oh no, how do I reverse this? Like get a refund, cancel the transaction.
Yes, so you're gonna need to have the ability to do that. And that's something I haven't touched this code in forever because I initially wrote it like over a year ago. And we put it on pause because we really wanted to work on lending protocol instead. But yes, there is an ability to update your desired quantity of output, or just an outright cancel. You can cancel and get your layer one back or get your synth back.
Ooh, I go here.
And I think that's going to be needed. Like you need the ability to dynamically and very quickly and efficiently update your position, right? Because that's we're going to get into this a little bit, but like this could be used, this order book limit order concept could be used by arbitrage bots to arb the price, right? To proactively, rather than waiting for a swap to occur and then reactively swapping in the direction like we were talking earlier, but proactively saying, here's my buy order, my sell order, whichever direction I'm going. And if the price dips below there, then like go ahead and acquire it then. And so that's going to be the ability to quickly and easily and if fast and relatively cheaply to update your position, to change your order because market prices are shifting or changing or whatever is a key and important component for arbs to use this as a tool to arb the pools.
Yeah. The benefit here is obviously these are swaps. So in this process, there's like 1, 2, there'll be 3, 4, 5, there'll be 6 swaps in the whole life cycle.
Yeah, if you go directly from layer 1 to layer 1 in the end, yeah.
Otherwise, it'll be 1. Well, sorry, it'll be just 2. It'll be a double swap if you go from synth to synth.
You actually need ETH.ETH on that orange bucket.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. For us,
I usually go ahead and
ETH.ETH references like the layer 1, where ETH/ETH represents the synthetic asset. Just for people at home.
I usually try and get this, and if we do this. I'll just pick up the colors later. Yeah, making the graphics is always just lots of reviews.
Yeah.
I could probably try and put this double swap thing in sometime later, but that's kind of like what we're doing, except the other way around because it's BTC and Ethereum out.
Yep.
All right. And then that I assume when it first launches, that'll be just single swaps, instant swaps, what we talked about, and then we'll enable streaming swaps. So it's the same process in here as what we talked about before with streaming.
Yep.
Is there anything else worth knowing about order books?
No, I think we got it all. I can't think of anything else. Maybe I'm forgetting something, but I think we got it.
Easy. So you've got native assets. Would you extend that to stables? So therefore, it has the same scope as savers.
Yes, I think that would be a key component for arbitrage is to have access to stables within the context of limit orders. I think generally arbs, not all arbs are the same. Different ones have different strategies, like different traders, different strategies. But one of the strategies that some arbs use is that they want to start and end always in a stable because they don't want to hold some other asset and then be price exposed to that other asset. And then whatever profits they made on the trade or the swap to arb the pool, they'd lose because the other asset, went down in price or something like this. So in order to kind of de-risk themselves, they kind of start in a stable and then end in a stable. They start a stable as 1,000 stable tokens, and they do a bunch of trading and swap, and they come right back to where they were. Now they have 1,010 or some number, whatever the hell the number would be. So in my opinion, we need to get a stable coin, which could be synthetic USDC, synthetic USDT, synthetic PayPal stablecoin, whatever that one's called, to be there so that you can start and end that way.
Would you use like the synthetic Tor anchors?
Not so Tor is a different type of synthetic. It's
so I meant the anchor pool, the anchor. You know what I mean? In Mimir with the anchor pool prefix. Those ones.
Yeah, those. Yeah. No, I mean technically it would be any of them because we allow synthetics in any pool. I think. Pretty sure we only allow synthetics in any pool, so it doesn't have to be a Tor anchor or not. It could be used for order books if you wanted to.
Oh, sweet sauce! Because it's just got that there.
Technically, you can just arb Like if you wanted to be, you can just arb between um just stable coins. I think it's probably theoretically possible. For some reason, USDC is trading at 99 cents right now, and USDT is trading at $1.01, and you could technically arb that within, right within THORChain without going anywhere, touching anything, and you just slowly grow your quantity of USDC or your quantity of USDT that way, I think.
Yeah, I know. Mate, he does that, runs an R bot, and it's all sense. Just
Yeah.
he just sits there and looks for an opportunity.
Yep.
Which also means this could be used for arbing as well. If it's just sitting there with a limit order using synths only,
Yep.
it's not for traders. It's going to be performing that arb function here to balance trades as soon as it sees it.
Yep. Yeah, arb, but also like just like market making, which is a thing that people do sometimes. Could be used in this context as well.
Someone did ask, can you hold an asset in Saber's Vault with limit orders set for a trade? I don't think.
Can you hold an asset? What do you mean by that?
I'm not
Like
sure.
while an order is like waiting to execute it, can you hold the original asset? Is that the question?
Oh, so therefore, okay. So if we take this one here, instead of it being held in the Asgard module, could we hold it in the Saber's Vault? So therefore, it's earning APY whilst you're waiting for the price.
Oh, I don't see why not.
Because it would be generating yield because it's sitting in the pool.
Right. So theoretically, if you were to put, say we supported the Savers with order books, and you put in one Bitcoin and you want to get out, say you want to get out, you're waiting for limit order and you want to get 40,000 USDC, right? So the price of Bitcoin is not 40, it's 35 right now. It's not $40,000, it's 35,000. And then you'll slowly gain more Bitcoin over time. Like you'll go from one Bitcoin to 1.01, and over time while we're waiting for Bitcoin's price to hit 40,000. And then because the limit order is looking for a specific, 40,000 Bitcoin, the price of Bitcoin does not actually have to hit $40,000 because the quantity of the source asset, Bitcoin in this case, is increasing over time. It's going from 1 to 1.01, 1.02. And so you eventually will get your $40,000 worth of USDC early when Bitcoin hits, let's just call it $39,000.
Mm-hmm.
But if you do that, then you'll be like, you're selling it cheap because you want to get, for one Bitcoin, you want 40,000 USDC, and we're slowly increasing the quantity of Bitcoin. What should also happen is the quantity of the USDC should like increase together. So as you get more Bitcoin, what you're asking for in USDC should also increase with it so that it trades at the ratio that you initially had asked for. Because if you don't do that, the ratio is changing because one asset is increasing and the other asset staying the same. And so like eventually it'll execute the trade because you'll get 1.5 Bitcoin or 1.2 Bitcoin or how the quantity would be, and it would just execute it early, and you'd be selling at a different price than you initially intended. So in order to support this idea conceptually, we'd have to dynamically increase the destination asset and the quantity asset that you're looking for as the source asset increases, if that makes sense.
Like quotes on the fly. Yeah.
It's got a quote on the fly. It's an interesting concept, and I'm not against it. It does complicate things, so there's a good chance maybe we'll just like launch this without that feature, just to keep it, just get from 0 to 1, just get the feature out, right, and get all the value proposition and the ROI of just having limit orders in general, and then maybe in like a V2 version of this particular feature, we can add support for streaming swaps, which would be like a no-brainer. Like nobody would not do that thing, right? Like it's pretty,
Yeah.
there's like very little, there's almost no downside because you don't lose Bitcoin because of savers. And well, maybe if you get into the point of like, if we do the synth breaker, circuit breaker concept thing, whatever you want to call it, and there's like negative interest rates, and there's forced ejections and this kind of stuff, like maybe that changes some things. But yeah, I would say it's possible. Theoretically, it's possible. Whether we actually do it or not is another conversation and debate. But there's almost no
So
reason not to do it.
just say if you don't do it, that synth that's sitting in the Asgard module, because it sits in the pool, will incur yield. It'll generate income. Where does that yield go?
It goes to the LPs, right? So any synth that's sitting in the network that you've
Yeah, it does.
deposited
Okay.
capital, you deposited value into the pool, but you're not exposed to whatever is generated from the activity on that pool, right? And so you're just basically
Yep.
giving it away to the LPs, right? As a saver, as a synth holder, as a saver, you're getting the yield, you're getting less than what the yield actually should be generating. You're getting like half or less than half or more than half, whatever the numbers. But here you're just like, I'm like, all right, I'm gonna deposit one Bitcoin, I have one synthetic Bitcoin in my hand, but the yield that thing's generating is going to the LPs, which means as an LP, if you deposit one Bitcoin as an LP, you're actually getting a yield of like 1.1, as if you deposited 1.1 Bitcoin. And I'm making up numbers here, so don't take these things as literal truths, but this is the general idea of like you deposit X, but you're actually getting the yield of Y, and Y is always larger than X. And so it juices the yield for LPs and giving a deeper liquidity to the pool, right? In a matter of speaking.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's just like any other synthetic there that's not in the vault. And yeah, being an LP can be beneficial.
Yeah.
Unless Rune's pumping and everything else is staying the same, then you
Yep.
get impairment loss. But overall, you should be fairly good.
But even if you're getting, here's the funny part. I'm gonna ask you a difficult question. Is that say you're in a dual side LP and the USDC pool, and we're to say we're going to enter into a bull market right now. Who knows if we actually are or not, but just say that's true. And Rune pumps from what is it now, $3.50 to all-time highs, $20 or higher, whatever. Now you're experiencing IL as you go up because the other asset's staying the same. You experience IL when the ratio between the two assets change from when you deposit it. That's when you experience the IL. And that's why if it goes awry and then it comes back, you don't experience it. That's why they call it impermanent. So in this scenario, because USDC is a stable coin, it's always going to be with a dollar, and Rune's pumping to $20, you are experiencing a bunch of IL because of that, right? Just the natural course of things. But because there's a bunch of savers in there and synthetic asset, as Rune is pumping and the value of the pool is increasing because Rune's value is pumping, the value of the stables, the stable savers is staying more or less the same, other than the yield it's generating. So as the Rune price is pumping, the percentage of the pool that the savers and the synths have decreases, and the percentage of the pool that the LPs have increases, which means you're in some ways, like you can see, is that like the dual LPs are taking value from the stable savers guys because their value is not increasing, but mine is, and I'm just like getting on this in this direction. Value is going from the savers to the LPs. So yes, I'm experiencing IL as this happens, but I'm also getting additional yield because this is happening. And how much additional yield is relative to primarily two things. One is how deep is the synth utilization? What percentage of the pool is synth utilization? The higher the number, the more value is coming in the direction towards the LPs. And another question is, how much of the pool do I personally own? Is it 1%? Is it 15%? Whatever it is. And so there is some sort of mathematical number that somebody could figure out, which I have not done the actual math to figure this out. Whereas even though you're experiencing IL, the extra yield you're getting from the savers going to the LPs counteracts that IL, and there is some mathematical point where it's like neutralized, where you don't, even though Rune's price is pumping, you're not experiencing any IL in a matter of speaking, right? And if you're above that point, then you're getting additional yield, and if you're below that point, you're getting additional a little bit of losses. So it's this kind of fascinating like mathematical thing of like, where do I have to be if I own this percentage of the pool and there's this percentage of synthetic, how much, if I own X percentage of the pool, how much synthetic savers should the pool have in order for me to break the IL and come out even? It's kind of an interesting question. I was asking myself the other day, and I haven't done the math to figure out what the answer is, but somebody on the industry in the audience wants to spend some time thinking about it, let me know what the answer is.
Yeah, if there's any quants in there listening.
Yeah.
For me, like, it depends on your target, because if your yield is going to outweigh the IL, then, you know, overall your position is going to make a profit. But if you're targeting an asset, like you're really bullish on Rune, then obviously if you say start up with 500 Rune and then Rune pumps, then you're only going to have 200 Rune redeemable. So you've lost out there, but overall you've gained. So it really depends on what you're doing.
In this
And
case, like, it's possible that Rune can pump. Normally you get less Rune, right? Because you're
yeah,
selling the strong asset and you're buying the weak. But in this case, it's mathematically possible that while Rune's pumping, the quantity of Rune that you're holding stays the same.
yeah, that'll be interesting.
Yeah.
That'll be interesting. I'm gonna say something. I forget. That's what LP University did. They'll work out all these strategies,
Yeah, they
depending on
could
what you
probably
want to do.
figure this out
Yeah,
for
yeah,
us.
yeah.
The smart people over there.
Baloney. Let's work something out.
Baloney, get on it.
All right. So, all peeing aside, so we've talked about normal liquidity pools, streaming swaps, synthetics, order books. Now, unless we've got anything else to add, we want to put that all together, and somehow talk about rapid swaps and how we can bring all these concepts together to make rapid swaps and what that looks like in the block, as in how we organize trades in the block, so therefore we're not affecting the pool, the XYK curve that we talked about, in one block. So rapid swaps, go.
So are you watching the YouTube chat? Because somebody's posting some stuff there, but for some reason I can't see it. I wonder why. When I go to the link, I can't see it.
Yes, I am.
Is it just because like I'm the one streaming? So there it is. No, now I can see the chat. Hey, here we go. Hello, everybody. Although I think the stream is like 20 seconds behind when we're actually talking, but
it's really distracting because I see you talking. I'm like, what?
Right. It's kind of hard to interact with the chat because it's so delayed. The live stream video is like, I think, like 20 seconds behind what we're actually doing. So that makes it a little bit difficult to interact with it, but we'll do the best we can.
Also, it's hard to listen to you, absorb it, and read at the same time.
Yeah. We need like a third person in the Discord and the Zoom here, just to be the producer of the show and really just, do all that stuff is what we need. All right. You ready to talk about rapid swaps?
I am. I've got a blank canvas here. So if you talk, I will try and scribe and listen and absorb at the same time.
All right, peoples. So rapid swaps is just a kind of a random name that came up the other day. I don't know if this is like the actual name for it, but the reason why it's called rapid is because it's kind of similar to stream, like streaming rapids, like it's all like, moving water. And rapid swaps is the concept at a high level. It means that it's still a streaming swap in the end. Like, you're still doing a streaming swap, but because order books allow for a proactive methodology for ARBs to ARB, they don't have to wait for a trade and then do another trade and then wait for a trade and then do another trade, and kind of go back and forth, block to block. It's possible that the order book, the limit order, can you go ahead and ARB things within the same block. So think of it this way, like, say you're doing a streaming swap and you want to, you're starting, the Bitcoin price is starting at $30,000. And then I have a sell my Bitcoin at, me as the ARB, I'm going to sell my Bitcoin at $35,000.05, right? Slightly higher of what the price is right now. And so my ARB is selling Bitcoin, and it's sorry, not my ARB, but me as a streaming swap, or Chris I'll put Chris as a streaming swap person. Chris as a streaming swap is, selling his Bitcoin. He's pushing Bitcoin to the pool, or rather he's buying Bitcoin, I guess, in another direction. And he's taking out, he's putting in Rune, he's taking out Bitcoin. And he's causing the Bitcoin to be more scarce in the pool, which causes the price can go from $35,000 to $35,000.05, right? So because within the order book, me as the ARB say, hey, it's hit $35,000.05. Go ahead and, acquire that Bitcoin, sell the Bitcoin and acquire Rune on the other side, or ETH or USDC, whatever the other asset is. And so you're taking advantage of that. So in theory, within a single block, the ARB streams a trade, the streamer streams a trade, the ARB trades the other direction, then the streamer streams a trade, and the ARB goes in the other direction, and the streamer streams a trade, and the ARB goes the other direction. And these things just kind of like, go back and forth, all in the same block, right? So within a single block, which happens every 6 seconds, you've done 10 sub swaps or 20 sub swaps, or there's no limit to it. So you could say 1,000. Like it doesn't really matter, depending upon the size of the trades and the size of the ARB and so forth and so on. So the negative of doing a streaming swap has always been that you're trading time for better price execution, right? And that's what they kind of drive this point on the THORSwap UI, if you use that particular UI, of like time effectiveness, or time sensitive versus price sensitive. And you have this kind of scale of like how much you want to fit on this thing. And so the idea of a rapid swap allows you to do an entire trade in a single block as if it was a time sensitive trade. Like, do you see what I mean? So you in effect, you can get the best of both worlds, where you get fast execution, like you do in a single trade or a single swap, but you get the price execution of a streaming swap all in a single transaction or a single block, right?
So help me draw this out. So I can just visualize. You can see I try to put it in the block, but if we draw it out, then hopefully we can, like I said, visualize the process happening about, what's from what.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm trying to buy, I'm buying Bitcoin at 35,000. So I'm assuming I'm doing a swap at that point.
Yeah, you're putting in Rune and you're getting out the Bitcoin because you're buying Bitcoin, and
Yep.
you're acquiring Bitcoin. And by doing so, there's more Rune and there's less Bitcoin in the pool, which means that the price of Bitcoin, effectively the pool price, not the market price, but the pool price, has increased by, I arbitrarily just said 5 cents, but it could be any number depending upon the size of the trade.
Yeah.
And generally, like a streaming swap generally is the same amount in both directions. So because a streaming swap is defined as like 5 bips, the dollar value of each sub swap is going to be the same between doesn't matter which direction you're going. So if you have a streaming swap going one direction and you have an ARB with a limit order streaming in another direction, he's going to buy 5,000 and then he's going to sell 5,000, and he's going to buy 5,000 and he's going to sell 5,000, and so forth, and like back and forth, and the same value. So in some sense, the pool is just moving from 35,000 to 35,005 cents, and then it's like all within a single block.
So how does this be? So this is the current process now. But how do you convert this into one block? Because usually that's across 2 blocks. How are you how are you stacking them? Because at the moment it doesn't happen. How are you stacking it all in one block like this, where you're doing a trade and then the ARBs counter doing it and trading? Is that because this is a limit order ARB?
Right, because the ARB is a limit order, and it's sitting there and it's waiting for a certain price to execute, which the swapper, the streaming swap, is granting them. It's streaming swap is changing the price to meet the condition that the ARB is looking for, right? And so the ARB, gets the exact thing, the price he's looking for, so that it makes a sub swap or a little mini swap, to partially acquire the other assets that the ARB is looking for. That makes sense.
Right. So then, okay. So we go ahead, we do a swap, and this limit order ARB is already there. And that's probably the key thing. It's already in place.
There.
It's sitting there waiting. Yeah.
Yep.
So then the block will go ahead, and as it streams, you're doing the first trade, which is a small impact on the pool, and then the limit order ARB is doing the counter trade, and so on and so forth until the trade's completed and there's no more opportunity for the limit order ARB to complete.
Yeah,
so
either the trade completes or the ARB completes, because they both have a limited amount of liquid or capital if they're pushing in one direction. So one's going to succeed, one's going to finish, and the other one's not, most likely. They're not going to finish at the same time. It's possible. It's just not likely to occur. So one will finish. It could be the ARB, it could be the trader. One will finish first, typically. Most likely, it's going to be the trader in most scenarios, just because the ARB is going to put up a very large position to sell at a certain price, and then they're going to constantly update their position. Probably at every block or every other block, something like this, like based upon what they're seeing in the external markets. As Bitcoin's price moves on the market price on Binance or whatnot, they're going to update their price on chain. It's like, oh, okay, Bitcoin's price has increased even more, so I'm going to kind of match it or whatever, depending on how ARBs want to play their game.
So if there's any overflow, it could be seen by a second ARB or second block, just by a normal ARB.
Right. There could be
the LO is to run out.
Right. ARBs can still ARB the way they ARB now. There's nothing being taken away in that sense. It's just giving them another way of doing it. And the only real difference is, one, you're waiting for a trade to execute, and then you're telling it to execute. And the other one, you're just being more proactive and saying, wait for this to happen and then trade against it. It's much more efficient for ARBs, I think, to use this newer methodology, because I think it's going to be probably cheaper, just because well, I guess it depends on how your strategy is, but I think what's probably going to end up happening, and I'm just making a guess here, but every block ARBs will broadcast a transaction that just updates all of their positions in a single transaction that costs, whatever it is, 2 cents, whatever it is. And so they're just spending 2 cents per block, but they're getting yield that's more than that. But they're making the network much more capital efficient.
Yeah, because to do this ARB, they'd have to send a synthetic transaction.
Yep.
So it's the same concept of,
which they do already
for streaming swaps. I know this is going silly, but I'll move this back over here. You're sending one transaction in, and then you're sitting and waiting for the ARB to complete. This would be the trade to complete, whatever, and then you're getting one transaction out.
Yep.
So it'd be the same process.
Yep.
So that means at the end of this block, this limit order ARB could be 60% completed, and then it's sitting waiting in the next block for the corresponding trades until it expires. And if it's quite large, it could take 100 blocks for it to go, assuming the price is moving in the one direction.
Right. I mean, I would think that an ARB would be more or less constantly changing its position. I mean, it's a little bit like concentrated liquidity in some forms, but not as an LP, as an ARB. It's a concentrated liquidity for ARBs. If that makes any sense. I don't think it partially makes sense, but as a concentrated liquidity person, you're constantly changing where you're sitting on that curve. You were talking about the curve earlier between the bananas and the apples, and as a concentrated liquidity person, you're kind of changing, the part of the curve that you want to sit on, right, between those two assets. You want to sit in the middle or a little off to the side, or and how large is the range between on that curve that you want to sit? That's what you're doing as an LP, right, on concentrated liquidity. And we're not doing that because I don't like concentrated liquidity. I think it's a terrible idea in some ways. I mean, it's a good idea in some ways and terrible in others. But we're using ARBs to be the thing that is giving us more capital efficiency rather than LPs, and they're giving us more capital efficiency. And so this is just giving them even another methodology of being more efficient.
Yeah, so that's concentrated from memory. Uniswap. Concentrated liquidity means you're going to get better price execution at the meet point for the price instead of saying up here. But it means that the whale swaps can't be as treated as well if you're doing massive swaps up here on the curve. Whereas this allows you to do the same concept, to sit, but you can actually choose your point. You could do concentrated liquidity over here. You can do it anywhere on the curve, which is actually really cool. Because you could actually, in here, you could do it here, and then there's massive price movements, and suddenly you're sitting in the middle. It just depends on the price movements.
Right. But the problem with that is that, like, in order to do that, you can't be an LP passively in a concentrated liquidity system, because the smarter, more technical, more data driven, people who are running servers that are like constantly updating their positions are just going to extract all the yield, and you don't get much yield at all as a passive person. You just kind of get IL and you just get losses. This is why, like, the majority of people on Uniswap V3 who are LPs are all at a loss, because they're all the fees that are being generated through the swaps are being concentrated to the top 5% of LPs or 10% of LPs, whatever the hell the number is, and everybody else is just getting nothing. And so in order to be an LP in these systems, you have to be like a pro. And if you try to do it like yourself by hand, you're still going to get, like, I read about a guy was tweeting about his experience on osmosis. Because they implemented concentrated liquidity, and he was trying to like do it himself, and he ended up just getting rugged. Not rugged is the wrong term, but he ended up just losing a bunch of money because of it, right? So you really, in order to do it, you have to have bots, right? Which is what an ARB is, right? An ARB is a bot. Nobody ARBs by hand. That would just be very ineffectual. And so you always have to have ARBs being bots. That's the only way that they can actually possibly work. And streaming swaps just leans on those bots rather than trying to create bots on the LP side. I kind of like the idea that, like, crypto should be open. Like, crypto should be available to everybody. If you want to earn a yield, even if it's $1, even if you're not the most tech savvy person, whatever, you should be able to generate a yield without, like, needing to spin up infrastructure and run like coding bots that do those. Like, it should be a more egalitarian in that sense, like in a way of thinking. So I kind of dislike personally the idea of constant liquidity. It does create more capital efficiency in an EM for sure, and it's better for the traders and executors in many ways, but it's not good for the LPs, I don't think, in my opinion. So it's something I always kind of shied away from in some sense. But here, a streaming swap works very well for ARBs. They make good money, and it works very good for LPs. They make even more money because they get better price execution.
So if we separate the concepts between liquidity providers, I think you're right, it's not correct. Liquidity providers and ARBs. Liquidity providers, even with this new way, work on every part of the curve. So it doesn't matter where the swap happens, they're still going to get the yield. And the more away from the center point, the more yield they get, because that's how the CLP works. Yep. Whereas what we're only talking about is where an arbitrator or trader, not an LP, can decide where on the curve they want to sit. That's the option for them. And obviously they probably want to sit in the middle, because that's where most of the trade's going to happen, particularly with 5 basis point swaps and potentially 5 basis points minimum only. But they can decide what they want, but it doesn't affect the LPs. LPs are still getting the benefit no matter what happens.
The middle just means an equality between the price of bananas and the price of apples are equal and the same, which is almost never the same, like the case in crypto, unless you got stable coins. Like, that's almost never the case. So you're usually not in the middle. Usually you're like way up or way down, depending upon like Bitcoin's worth a lot more than Rune per token.
Oh, well, yeah. Well, I bet, so you know what I mean? Like, in the curve, if we say, I'm trying to say that in simplistic things, that, when the pool's balanced, we're sitting here. When the pool's way out, we're doing a massive swap. Then we're moving up, or depending what we're taking the pool out of balance.
Right. If the quantities of bananas, the quantities of apples are if it's not measured in terms of assets, it's measured in terms of dollars. You'd be right, but it's measured in terms of like tokens. In this case, apples and bananas. Then they will not be equal 50-50. They'll be somewhere further down or further up the curve, I think. It'll typically sit there most commonly.
Yes.
It's rare for something to sit right in there in the middle, I think. But to be honest, like, I'm not an expert in this like XY curve XYK stuff. Like there's another member of the team who's much more privy and has a deeper understanding of this stuff than I do.
I try to find the most simplistic example without all the math formulas and stuff, because it does get
Lost.
complex.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I've got the website up there somewhere. That's how I think about it without getting into the maths and watching long videos that explain it. All right. I want to ask, when we talk about ARBs, without rapid swaps, how will this affect interblock arbing? Just like, I don't know, like how much can you do an interblock arb? Or because I know people, they sit there, they quote, they're always looking at the pool. Then they need to identify an arb opportunity and then obviously send it in, and they may not be getting interblock. So I don't know how much interblock happens now, and obviously this would
I mean, that just
change
depends
interblock
upon
arbing.
the strength of the arbs in some sense. Like, I mean, you can think of it, there's going to be tiers of how arbs arb, right? And in my mind, I see it as it's much more efficient for the arbs, and there'll be competition for the arbs to do this rapid swap kind of arbing thing we've been talking about as the first ordinal, the first attempt, right? Because it's where the competition is going to be. You want to be the first one to arb a trade, and you don't want to wait until block number two. You want to do it in block number one if you can, because if you're waiting for block two, some other arb's going to wait for block one, and you're going to lose, right? Obviously, you don't want to lose as an arb. So the pressure is going to be to get everything done in block one, right? Now, if for whatever reason, because arbs run out of capital, or or they just didn't price their shit correctly, or whatever the reason is, and now we're going to fall back to block two, like to an interblock arbing system, right? Which might be another type of bot coming in. Maybe it's a human coming in. Like, who knows what that can be. And then if that runs out, maybe because we run out of synthetics, or we've, there's been huge trades like when the FTX hacker pushed a lot of funds through the network. Arbs had a hard time arbing because they would just like burn through all their synths, and then like if they go back and acquire more synths, and so then you go from like a single block arbing to a multi-block arbing, and then after that kind of like doesn't work out, you just like burn through all the capital, then you go back to like layer one arbing, where you're actually just arbing with actual layer one assets back and forth. So you get this kind of like tiered system. And for us, like if we create more tiers, more efficient systems, we started with the layer one when we launched the network a couple of years ago. We added synthetics, about a year later after we launched MCCN. And now we're adding this new layer of, this is my vision to add this new layer. Whether this happens or not is another topic. Because not, and that's like maybe some devs disagree with me on this, or on doing this at all. But my mentality, what I would like to see happen is that we introduce a third tier of efficient arbs. So it's like the least efficient, middle efficiency, and then the most efficient way of arbing the pools. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Yes.
So you generally start with the most efficient, and then you go down the second efficient, and then you just kind of go down the road until you finally arb the thing. But a huge amount of capital, like the FTX hacker, for example, or whatever, might push beyond with the efficiency of the layer one, the efficiency of the second layer of arbing, and get to the layer three, if you want to call it layer three. I'm kind of giving this interim names, but. And even on the layer three, we've been talking about making that more efficient, right? In the sense of changing the conf counting, how the conf counting works, be more flexible when we need it to be. So you don't have to wait in conf counting if you want to arb the pool. And then the other thing we're doing is implementing Swapper Cloud, which allows the arbs, layer one arbs, to exit and get their capital back as fast as possible. Because we saw in the scenario, like when the FTX hacker was pushing all these funds through, an arb on layer one, and his funds would be stuck in the network for like an hour on the delayed outbound, and they wouldn't be able to arb it another round and arb it again to correct the price, because his funds would be locked up in the delayed outbound, and just would take an hour for him to come back again to do another round of arbing, which is obviously not very good, not very efficient. So we're just kind of improving the different layers and adding more ability and empowering arbs to do what they do much more effectively, much more efficiently, so that we can see $1 billion of trade volume in a single day, and the pool price matches the market price quite closely.
So reducing the conf count, that's primarily going to be the UTXO. We're not really talking about EVM based chains.
Oh no, I mean it would be applied to any of the chains we want. I mean, I think it's one of the PRs that one of the devs working on right now is to have a lever that we can pull on and say, let's loosen the conf counting, right? Because um, conf counting is a very kind of big topic, and we probably don't have time to get into it now because I have to take off in 10 minutes for a meeting. But conf counting is a very complicated topic. That's a long history, and historically we've always talked about like Bitcoin has six confs, for example. Like I think Chainflip, for example, is going to do six confs for their transactions. And this six conf idea came from a white paper that was written in like 2012. I can't remember the guy who wrote it. I forget. But in the paper, he writes like, you got to make sure that the transaction is real. It doesn't get undone in a reorg or something like this. And so, like, six is a good number. Like, six is a good number, right? Like, it wasn't any like real reasoning behind it. And obviously, things have changed a lot since 2012. Bitcoin's hash rate is a lot higher now than it was in 2012. So there's a lot of reasons why that doesn't make sense anymore, but it made sense maybe at the time. And so we approach conf counting very differently. We don't have like a set conf count, like a set number, which is what most exchanges do. We look at the value coming in a particular block relative to the block rewards of that block. So a block reward right now is 6.25 Bitcoin, which is, what is that, like 200K or something like this, whatever the hell the actual dollar number of that is. And so say it's $200,000 and you put in $200,000 of transaction, just one conf. But if you put in $400,000, that's two confs. If you put in 600,000, that's three confs. That's how it works now. And so the lever that I've been talking about is way of just like, instead of just doing like 1x, we'll do 2x. So if it's $200,000 of block reward, we'll support up to 2x that per block. So if you get $400,000, still one conf.
It's just loosening it. It's not really changing the
formula. It's just loosening. Right.
Changing the formula. Yeah, loosening it.
At some level, we might have to do that because, and maybe this is one of the reasons why central exchanges do this, is that like, if you just did it by value alone, you may not be able to get in a lot of value within the 24 hours, right? Like if you're taking in, we'll just call it, $2 billion of Bitcoin transactions per day. If it's only $200,000 per block, and there's however blocks there are in a day, I can't remember off the top of my head, you can only take in so much money. And then it becomes like a big problem because like nobody can get their actual trade through. So you have to loosen it to some degree. And you can either take the static, we're going to wait six confs mentality, or just loosen what we already have. Shapeshift has been doing one conf for Bitcoin for a long time, and it's never really been a problem for them. So maybe that's what we should be doing. Who knows? But conf counting is a very complicated topic. We could probably spend another hour talking about.
Yeah, I don't want to get into that one too much. Maybe we'll do another session and we can talk about all these things.
But that's all part of that kind of like bottom layer of arbing of like how we make that more efficient. Well, we loosen the conf counting. We make swapper cloud not delay outbound transactions for arbs as much, so they can get their capital in and out as fast as possible, so they can put it back in for another round of arbing.
Just going back to, I got a couple more questions. Going back to rapid swaps. So that's potentially going to put a lot more trades within a block. So I'm assuming that the swap ordering remains the same. And so that's correct. The swap ordering and the swap queue ordering remains the same.
That's still a thing, but the difference now is that at the end of the block, we do all of our swaps, right?
Yeah.
And after we do all the swaps, then the limit orders then execute, whichever ones that can be executed, right? And so now what happens is, in the current code, it just does all the swaps and then it executes whatever limit orders it can, and then the block is done. We're done for the block, right? But in this new kind of rapid swaps mentality, if we do this, it would do all the swaps, it would do the limit orders, and because swaps were executed, it goes back again and does it a second time, and another limit order. And because some swaps were executed, something larger than zero, we go back and do it again. And we just keep on looping and looping and looping and looping until we get no swaps, because none of the price executions, are met, right? And so then it just carries on.
So you do normal, when we're talking about normal swaps, are we doing normal L1 and synth swaps?
Yes, L1 synth swaps as well as limit orders.
Uh, well, because you've got normal swaps, then limit orders, and then it loops. And I know the lendings generally last, like the derived assets as well.
Yep. Yeah, that's basically how it works at a high level. It actually gets more complex than that if you look into it, but we probably don't have the time to go too much into the weeds.
So what? That's cool. What effect? So Juggernaut Art wants to know: does it mean more CPU for node usage and stuff like that? So I guess another way of framing that is saying, do you know the impact this would have on the replicated state machine to conduct more of these swaps, to conduct more computation into block to enable this?
I mean, I see it as a net neutral, right? From a computational perspective, if you have to make 10 subswaps, right, and arbs that are in between each subswap, does it really matter if it's in one block versus 10 blocks? In the end, the computational requirements are basically the same, right? It potentially could make block times be a little bit longer, right? They're about 6 seconds now, and maybe after this feature, they're 6.5 seconds or something like this. I'm making up a number, but like that's theoretically possible. But to me, that's not a big deal because I'd much rather have slightly longer block times and have rapid instant string swaps that have the best of both worlds of the speed of a single swap and the price execution of a streaming swap. To me, that value of that is so important, so valuable to the protocol and valuable from a UX perspective that I don't really give a shit about the 6.5 second thing. It's an easy trade-off in my mind.
Okay, cool. All right.
In fact, you could argue that this is actually more efficient because in a streaming swap currently, you submit a transaction and you're getting like 10 subtrades, but the ARB is submitting multiple transactions on the other side. So they're actually processing more transactions or more things that are entering the mempool in a matter of speaking. Whereas now you're both submitting just one transaction, each. So two transactions in total that's sitting in the mempool that get pulled in, but you're executing them very fast between the two and not having a bunch of more transactions being added on top that are entering the mempool and going through the validation process and all that kind of stuff. So it's maybe you could actually make an argument that this methodology would be computationally more efficient, but probably fairly insignificantly.
So, I love just thinking of these things pop out. So this have less transactions overall because you're going to have less ARBs sent in. Also, this is going to produce more liquidity fee versus block reward per block because you're jamming more swaps into the block. So I think it's about 50-50 now. We should see that going up. So block rewards having less and less of a factor in the overall system income.
Yeah, because instead of if you're going to get 5 basis points and swap fees collected, we'll just call that $100. Instead of doing that over 10 blocks, so you're doing like $10 per block, you're doing the full 100 in a single block, effectively, which could mean that you would, and because the system is more capital efficient, because you're making a large trade and you're doing it very quickly in a very short period of time, maybe that increased capital efficiency would just garner more swappers to come in, right? Like I saw an interview or a video of Simon from Chainflip, and he was talking about THORChain, and he's launching Chainflip probably in the next few weeks or something like this. And he's always said that the two things that Chainflip was going to do that THORChain does not was one, it's going to have like you could do 5 Bitcoin trades and a 5 Bitcoin trade, and it'll be reasonable, which that's no longer the case. So he didn't mention that one again in this particular talk. But the one thing he did mention was that the speed of THORChain, like how long it takes to do a trade. And so if you look at the idea of rapid swaps, I mean, look at the idea of a swapper cloud. Both of these things are geared towards creating a more fast, more efficient, the faster execution of a particular trade to be like, theoretically instantaneous, right, within a single block. And then you get the Bitcoin coming out on the other side, like now, not in an hour from now, but now, or close to now. And so both of these features combined, if we can get these things kind of out there, they would make it would not give Chainflip an inch to stand on to say that how we're better than THORChain. We can do faster trades. We can execute faster. But now we can, if we get these two features out, I think we would be, fairly instantaneous.
I like it. Two more questions, and then
Sure.
I'll let you go.
Okay.
So there'll be a lot of swaps inside of the block, and I know there's a 100 swap limit per block. Has that getting close to being reached now that streaming swaps is on, and would you consider moving that? Is there any reason why it's 100, or is that just the arbitrary number of we'll set it there just as
Yeah,
a security measure?
It was purely fairly random. I'm gonna look up the answer for you in this dashboard. It was a fairly random number that we came up with, and we just did that just to put limitations on the system. As in coding, you never want to put unbounded systems because it's always just a recipe for failure. And so we put a limit on it, and it also, what that limit does is it creates, if it does get full, right? The benefit of that is that it just kind of prioritizes the big trades versus the smaller trades. Big trades produce more revenue for the network. Smaller trades produce less revenue for the network. And so it just kind of prioritizes these things. So then it becomes like a Bitcoin network kind of effect where your transaction gets through if you pay enough in gas fees. And yours, if you don't pay much in gas, you don't get your transaction through in Bitcoin. And so that more or less creates the same thing, but instead of like gas fees paying, it's like if you produce something really valuable, like a large trade, you get through quickly. And if you don't, you have to wait to the next block, or maybe the next block, or maybe the next block after that. So we can arbitrarily increase that number. And to go through the chart here, which is somewhere, let's see here. Maybe it's on this.
Why are you doing it? The system will overflow. So if just say this fills, block one fills at the swap limit, then it's designed to overflow into the next block, and so on and so forth.
It creates a natural overflow. And just looking at the dashboard I'm looking at now, I mean, we're not really seeing, you have a swap queue, but it's like the biggest one I can see in the last like 24 hours, or this thing is, or yeah, it's probably about 24 hours, is about 15 sitting in the queue. So, relatively speaking, not that much. So, but that could also change like in the bull market, right? Because you're going to see a lot more, things happening, a lot more. And like, you have to remind you that like we're seeing more active traders today than we ever have in its history, even more than the top of the bull market. So we are seeing more transactions, more active users, more swaps per day now than we're seeing even at the bottom of the bear versus the top of the bull. So even now we're still seeing only like 15. The largest queue I can find in the last 24 hours is about 15 sitting in the queue. So not very much, right? Not very much at all. So we're not even really close to that. And if we ever get close to that 100 cap, we can either just like increase it arbitrarily or remove it entirely, or what. We can have that conversation when we get there.
Right. Last question, because I'm going to go. When will we expect to see limit orders without streaming? Just normal limit orders, testing it out inside of mainnet, or even like fully tested in StageNet. When would you expect to perhaps see that?
That's a good question. For the most part, the Nine Realms team has been advocating for Q4 to be focused on not features, and just like stability, reliability, decentralization, optimizations, so forth and so on. So you're probably not going to see that this quarter. I would like to see that in the first quarter of next year if I had my way, which I don't always get my way, unfortunately, but that's just the way decentralized protocols work. So I would hope to see it in sometime in Q1. But I think for features like major features, like the next thing I have in mind is memless transactions would probably be the next one, and then after that would be just limit orders, which would probably include the streaming swap limit orders. Just when we launch one, we'll probably launch them both. We might see some things before that, like Software Cloud. I think something I'm actively trying to work on right now. For example, Mimir V2 is coming out in version 124, at least the foundation of it, that kind of stuff. But you probably won't see limit orders until probably Q1.
All right, cool. Well, I'll leave it there. I know we could definitely talk for a long time. Thanks very much for your time.
Yeah, no worries.
And we should do another one of these.
Yeah, we should. Now that we know how to set one up, sort of.
Yeah. It's technical issues at the start.
I can build a blockchain, but I can't start a live stream.
No, right? Same here. I'm so not technical.
All right, bro. I gotta go head my meeting. Talk to you in a little while.
All right. Cheers, mate.
Cheers.